I'm Bobby Broyles along with Tim McDonald. The final Saturday of the regular season is upon us, and This Week in CA Football, presented by Geico, is here to break it all down for you. I know there's plenty to get into, Tim, but I have to start in Williamsburg with William and Mary clinching at least a share of the conference title.
The Tribe gets it done at home versus Towson. Didn't really outrush the Tigers and outpass the Tigers. It wasn't the prettiest game, but they get it done. A huge win, stay undefeated at home in the regular season. William and Mary, like you just mentioned, Bob, first conference championship, a share of it at least since 2010. A huge win for the Tribe, and Steve Cluley in that game was just absolutely lights out, over 90% completion percentage, and it showed William & Mary when you shut down the run game, you can still beat them through the air. Really impressive performance overall. Richmond, JMU, and Villanova, let's not forget, also alive right now for the title. JMU survived the scare on the road at Delaware. Brian Shore to Brandon Ravenel late with 17 seconds left is the difference for JMU. They survived. Richmond, wow, 2 straight losses, lose a tough game at Villanova. Every single year, I know we say this, but it does really come down to the last weekend of the season, setting up some absolutely huge matchups. I mean, you look across the board, Villanova's still a playoff team. There's a potential for 6 teams. Towson 6-4, New Hampshire 6-4. There's 6 possible playoff eligible teams if you want to look at what the committee is looking for when it comes down to this final weekend. Yep. I know we're going to get right into it, but I mean, literally every season it comes down to this last weekend because every Saturday is that important.
And of course, if William and Mary does lose to Richmond this weekend, then there are 3 co-champions. It would be Richmond.
And if they do win outright, then obviously they are the champion.
Yes, and if William and Mary wins outright, they will be the outright CA football champions. Nice transition there. So let's get started with Richmond hosting William and Mary at noon on Comcast Sportsnet and CA.TV. Longtime rivals squaring off in the 125th edition of the Capital Cup.
Some people around this part call it the oldest rivalry in the South, as I might like to say it. Richmond is coming to this one winning 3 straight games in the series, 8 of the last 10. And honestly, Bob, you look at the last 2 years, Richmond has essentially ended William Mary's season. William Mary's been 7-5, finished the season the last 2 years. There's a lot of bad blood, I think, amongst this rivalry. And last year, Richmond went to William & Mary, won on the road in dominating fashion. The stakes are high, as always. You look at this, there's potential for a seed. You maybe talk about that if you're William & Mary. If you win this game, obviously you get the automatic qualifier. And Richmond, if you lose this game, that's 3 straight losses. We're not going to get too much into that. That's thinking ahead too much. But again, look at Richmond during this stretch. During this stretch of two losses, Jacoby Green, he's still getting his yards.
Yes.
The Richmond offense is still moving the ball, still putting up the points, but it's been costly turnovers. Look at last week at Villanova, prime example, in the red zone, 2 turnovers that were huge in that game. Richmond scores late, okay, you think maybe they're going to pull it out. Then all of a sudden, Villanova, they missed the extra point. Villanova comes down the field, converts on a 4th down. I think the play of Kyle Auletta is going to be huge. 1 touchdown and 5 picks in the last 2 games, which obviously were both losses. And then Steve Cluley coming into this game. Couldn't be a hotter quarterback right now in the FCS. 21 of 23 last week, 2 touchdowns. Both of them came to Kevin Hart. William & Mary right now, yes, they have to go on the road, but the confidence that this team has and the bad blood from losing those 2, basically getting their season ended the last 2 years by Richmond, I think that's a huge factor coming into this contest. Obviously, Richmond, with a win, can move forward and also have a lot of momentum, but I think William & Mary right now, on both sides of the ball, playing well, and they know what's at stake in this one.
And, of course, there will also be a little scoreboard watching during that contest, mainly from the fans, not the players. But
hopefully not.
Because over across I-64 up into the Shenandoah Valley, James Madison welcomes Villanova also at noon on CA.TV. Both teams, as we mentioned, still alive for a share of the league title.
I'm sure they will be checking up at the JMU at that big board, checking the scores in between quarters. But, again, wow, what can you say about Villanova? Credit to Andy Talley and his coaching staff and the seniors of this team. We talked about senior week last week versus Richmond being a huge contest, and it proved to be true. Kevin Goulias, the senior, 2 touchdowns, 120-plus receiving yards, an absolutely monster game. And that 4th down and 7 from the 12-yard line, Villanova called a timeout and scored against just an absolutely gutsy call. Your season is on the line, and Bednarchik fits it in there somehow. An absolutely beautiful game and a huge win for Villanova. JMU, all of a sudden, you're watching that Delaware game, you're thinking, here the Dukes, they might lose 3 straight games. Get it done. I'm on the sideline and I'm watching that game at Delaware, and I'm looking at Brian Shore, the offensive line. Most impressive part of that game was never did they have a look that we're going to lose this game. It was a complete confidence, and they showed it on that last drive. The shanked punt certainly helped, don't get me wrong, but JMU still had the guts to drive down the field, and we mentioned Brandon Ravenel catches a huge touchdown pass from Brian Shore, who's gaining confidence. Slowly this offense is getting back to the JMU. Isn't it amazing to think about this matchup? Bednarchik versus Brian Shore. And at the beginning of the year, I'm sitting here, giddy, just thinking about Vadley versus John Robertson. That's CA football. That's change in the FCS, and that's what the playoffs are all about. Whoever wins this game obviously is going to make the playoffs. The loser is still up in the air. But again, a huge contest, and I mean, I'm going to be switching channels all day long on Saturday.
We'll be up there.
It's gonna be, we'll actually be there.
We'll actually be up
maybe
there.
I won't have to.
Yeah, exactly. At noon, Elon hosts Delaware on CA.TV. The Phoenix have an opportunity here to finish 500 in conference play, and that would be an amazing year 2 for Rich Skrosky's team.
It really would, and we say amazing because you look at Elon's schedule and the Elon's performance last season, 1 win, and they did not have a CA football win. What did they do last week? Win at Maine. Again, it got a little bit hairy there in the end, but they held on for the win. Elon converted, really did a great job of forcing Maine turnovers early, got up to a 17-0 lead, and held on for that one. You talk about this Elon team too right now, and Rich Skrosky talked about it in the postgame. It's just the emotions going through this team. They lost a teammate last week. Just absolutely amazing how that team was able to break through and get a win at Maine, which is not easy and not an easy place to win. You look at coming into this one, Delaware, you need to finish strong if you're the Blue Hens. I know the last 2 losses, especially, they've come into this one losing 3 straight, but the last 2 have just been very tough. Obviously, the James Madison game, which we were at last week, Bob. The run game, it was there at times, and the defense actually kept them in that game. But unfortunately, Delaware is learning the hard way. You have to finish games in CA football, especially late, and they learned that the hard way with 17 seconds last week. Elon's passing attack right now instantly is all of its offense. 75.9 rushing offense, which is last in CA football, and Delaware right now last in passing offense. So I think we know what both teams want to do coming into this one. But both teams can end the season strong on a good note with a win.
And of course, like you said, Tim, we continue to send our condolences to the Elon program after the tragic passing of student-athlete Dimitri Allison last week. Our thoughts and prayers remain with the Allison family. At 1, New Hampshire, fresh off 3 straight wins, hosts arch-rival Maine in the Battle of the Bryce Cowell Musket. Wildcats still have playoff hopes while Maine tries to play spoiler.
A huge game in Durham. I mean, hasn't the last couple of years, too, this contest has really been, it's a coin flip every year, don't get me wrong. New Hampshire comes into this one having won 10 straight games in November and 3 straight overall in the series. 3 straight overall and 5 straight in the series. But every single year, I feel like we talk about either New Hampshire can go to the playoffs with a win or Maine can get a seed with the win. Maine's defense last week, I mean, couldn't be the blame. Only 185 yards in that loss to Elon, and just the offense got it going, but it really didn't happen until the 4th quarter. Dan Collins played a little bit better. Micah Wright had a huge week. He was a freshman of the week in CA football, had over 190-plus yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. But again, it all came too little too late. New Hampshire remain steady, still in the hunt. 6-4 right now. Not the sexiest win on the road at Albany, 24-14. Could have been a couple more points. They turned the ball over inside the red zone a couple of times, but New Hampshire coming home, I think, is going to be the key this week. We know Maine is probably going to try to get it done through the air. New Hampshire actually ranks 3rd in CA football in pass defense. A lot of people don't realize that. And Maine averages 120 yards rushing. Maine's going to try to set the tone and try to have balance, but I think New Hampshire playing at home, Sean Goldrich, Jared Allison, Julian Turner, a couple of these seniors playing in their last potential home game, I think that's going to be key. Again, it's Maine and New Hampshire battle for the Bryce Cowell Musket. Anything can happen.
Of course, Casey DeAndre in the back end of that defense is part of that reason why they're the 3rd best against the pass in CA football. In another 1 o'clock kick, Albany travels to Stony Brook. And Tim, we've got a new trophy on the line in this one. The battle for the Golden Apple.
I mean, it's literally a giant golden apple.
Yes.
Is there anything better on the final Saturday in CA football? Albany leads this series 10-6 all time. Last year they got it done. And SUNY, for those of you who don't know, State University of New York is the SUNY schools. There's a lot of pride in the state of New York among schools. Stony Brook and Albany play against each other in a lot of sports, especially this rivalry. They want it to be something that comes, coveted. You want to win the Golden Apple trophy.
Yes, you do.
I would want to win that. I want to win it right now.
Probably tastes real good.
Stony Brook coming into this one fresh off a 19-7 win over Rhodey, and they really dominated that game on both sides of the ball. 19-7, I know it's not the sexiest. Again, I use sexy there, but Donald Leontine had his 2nd straight productive game, over 100 yards rushing. Stony Brook scored on a safety, a blocked punt, and they also scored a passing touchdown as well, so really got it done on all 3 phases of the game. New Albany last week missed 3 field goals, was in that game in the first half versus New Hampshire, only went down 10-0 at the half. But offensively, again, it was too hard to get the ball moving through the air against New Hampshire. I think this week, Stony Brook playing at home, I think, helps in this series, and I think Stony Brook is going to be able to get it done with the run game.
Wrapping up the final week of the regular season with Towson, who has postseason aspirations as well, hosting Rhode Island at 2 o'clock on CA.TV.
Really interesting matchup because both teams are coming off losses. Rhodey only has 1 win on the season, and we remember last season what Rhodey did, at home versus Towson. Picked up their only win of the year, and it really deflated Towson going into the offseason. Towson's very much alive in this playoff discussion despite the loss at William & Mary. 6-4 entering this game, and they can finish potentially with 7-4. In my mind, if I was a committee member, I'm not, but if I was a committee member,
Yeah.
7-4 in this conference is good enough for me to get into the playoffs. First, you got to get past Rhodey. Rhodey, like I mentioned, only has 1 win on the year. Again, they played better.
Yes.
Yeah. I know it didn't show last week, but Rhodey is playing better. Wesley McCoy is doing a little bit better. Each week, I know it's tough for Rhodey. I know it's tough to get things going offensively, but Rhodey has a chance in this one. I think Tigers going into this one knowing that they need a win to be playoff eligible is huge, but I also think you can't afford to overlook Rhodey in this game. We saw Darius Victor score twice and have some success on the rush game. Townsend's defense, I think, is going to be the key. Still very good performance at William & Mary despite the loss last week. I think that's going to be the difference.
CAFootball.com will have links to watch the live streams and live stats from the final week of the regular season. Also, CA.TV will have a live simulcast of CSN's broadcast with Richmond playing host to William & Mary.
Be sure to follow the league on social media this weekend, including Twitter and Facebook, by searching CAA Football. We have an official hashtag, too, in case you haven't heard me say this 8,000 times this year, CAAFB, to join the conversation with us. Sunday should actually be really fun, too, on social because we'll be doing a live update throughout the day of Selection Sunday, breaking down highlights, retweeting team reactions, everything you need to know for the playoffs. You can check us in on Twitter on Sunday. And,
of course, CA Football's on-campus crew wrapped up their travel season with a trip to Delaware on Saturday. Visit CA Football's Every Day is Saturday blog at cafootball.wordpress.com for coverage from Delaware, and tune in tomorrow for the season finale of our Going Deep feature series on the Blue Hens.
I'm not going to give too much away here, but we met a great young man at Delaware and a really terrific group of supporting cast at Delaware. We learned about the Delaware football family. We learned about a pair of grandparents who were just absolutely amazing people. A really great story and a great way to cap off the season. Tremendous thanks to Mike and Eric throughout the year for a great job on these Going Deep features. And, a lot of travel throughout the season, so congrats to them as well. But again, be sure to check that out on the Delaware Blue Hens. It should be great.
Tim, it's like Christmas Eve here. The playoffs are just around the corner.
I'm just right. Selection Sunday, baby. 11 a.m. on ESPNU on Sunday. That's all I got to say.
Absolutely. Make sure to tune in. We'll be back here next week. Enjoy the final Saturday of the regular season.